I am Sandra Finbo. I was Sandra Richards until March, and I'm a chartered biomedical scientist. And my background is in cellular pathology, which is both histology and cytology, so body parts.
That's a whole heck of a lot.
It's cool. It's messy, but it's really great. It's really cool. You get to learn so much about the body, and that, you know, when you have a textbook and it looks all very neat and tidy, you've got the liver and the spleen and the lungs, and it's all so pretty. But actually, when you see inside a human being, it's kind of like that, but it's really quite not like that. It's really quite messy and a bit sort of squished in and that, and you think, wow, it's just nothing like the books. For me in my life, achievement for me has just been doing what they said you're not going to do, Sandra. You can't do that. You're far too stupid. You're not bright enough. You're not clever enough. And for me to actually go out and say, well, I'll show you. There's been so many times that I've done that, and that's achievement. Things, you know, I got laughed at when I said I wanted to be a firefighter. Not only was I a firefighter, but I was the first female firefighter in Kent. So that was an achievement. I was only 16. I didn't quite understand how cool it was at the time. And again at school, when I said, oh, you know, I really like science, I want to be a scientist, and they're like, oh, don't be so stupid, you're really not clever enough. And I had that all the way through school. So not only did I become a scientist, actually I'm a pretty good one. I'm well known for my work and I'm awarded for it. So achievement for me has been doing the things that I was laughed about at when I said I wanted to do them. That's achievement. Just go and watch me. Just watch me do it, and I will. And I have. When I was about 7, in the late 70s, so it was okay then, my dad worked full time and my mum worked nights. So come the school holidays and the weekends, I was an only child, so I just entertained myself. And my dad, who is awesome and just encouraged me to do anything and everything, bought me a microscope set from a student who just finished her A-levels and she was going to go to uni. And he got me this little microscope, loads of slides and all the stuff. And I remember one weekend, I guess, when I was about 7 or so, sitting in the garden thinking, oh, I don't really know what to do, I'm bored, you know. So I went and got the family's Goldfish. And I had intended just to play boat. So I had this goldfish on a flip-flop in a bucket of water, and we were just going to play at that time. But I didn't understand respiration, and the fish died really quite quickly. And I remember thinking, I don't really know what to do now. I'm a bit bored. I wasn't really expecting the fish to die. So I got the microscope and all the kit out, and I cut it up. I thought, well, I'll cut this fish, and I'll have a look at it under the microscope and see what I can see. And I remember at the time it being really quite difficult to cut. It was actually quite tough. But I put it under the microscope on the stage, and I looked through and I went, can't really see anything. It was a bit rubbish. And I remember doing that, and I didn't know at the time that was histology. Cutting tissue, looking at it under the microscope to look at the cells, that's histology. And I didn't realise it at the time, but that was my baby steps into what would become my professional career. So that's one of my earliest memories of science. I didn't really know what I was doing, so I don't know where it came from. Why did I think to cut a goldfish and put it under the microscope? I've no idea what led to that, but...
And what did Mom and Dad say?
I don't remember. I think she was more cross that I then went on to get some worms out of the garden, and you know where this is going, in a test tube, over the cooker, and cook them up in the water, and I'm sure my mum just went spare and just like this, probably. The cats clearly ran off. So my dad wanted me to do well. My mum was a provider. She cooked, she baked, she worked, she sent me to school spotless. So my mum's role was a loving role. My dad was, let's push her, see what she could do. So I think just growing up, it was just a case of getting on with it. My family weren't academic, so they didn't push me into science or into maths or anything like that. I was just always curious about medicine, about the body and what goes wrong and how can we fix it. But you know, although I did that as a kid, I didn't go into science until I was in my late 20s. When I was 16, so this is the thing, I left school with no GCSEs. I failed every single one of them. I got 2 Ds, 2 E's, 2 F's and a G. And I was quite surprised at that. And so, okay, that's the life I thought I was going to have, just kind of mediocre, getting on with it, going to work. So, I did a variety of things, but I went in the fire service, and then I went in the army, and I had a great time when I was in the army for a few years. I drove great big trucks, that was my job, I was a driver, but I did that for a few years, and then I was in Germany for a couple of years as a posting, and then eventually I came back to the UK. I'd left the army and settled down into a mediocre job, and I had my first son Dean, who's now 17, and it sounds really quite soppy, but it really was him that was the changing point for me. I remember just holding him and looking at him and saying, it's not good enough to be a single mum on the dole. I didn't want that for him, and I didn't want that for me, and I thought, well, what do I actually do to change this? Obviously I need a good job, I need a decent salary. How do you get that? And for me, it was a case of, right, you need to get yourself geared up and go to university. That will open the door for you. So I set about, I went to college and I did childcare because having left school with nothing, I was too scared to do a proper course. So I needed to practice in writing essays, reading books. And I did that, and it was great actually. I learned an awful lot. My son was about 6 weeks old, so it was really good for him as well. And then I did an access course and found that actually I'm not stupid in the slightest. I was quite clever really, and I absolutely loved it. Went off to uni, but I was really struggling. In my first year of uni, I did biochemistry, didn't like it, really couldn't do it. But I actually found that at age 27, I was an undiagnosed dyslexic. So no wonder I failed everything at school. It was the learning was wrong for me. I wasn't stupid, I just learnt differently. So that was addressed, and I found then that actually I didn't want to do this course anymore. So I wrote to the local hospitals and said, look, I know I want to do science, I know I want to do medicine of some description, but I really don't like my course. I'm dyslexic, I can't really cope with it. So I was offered a job in histology in the lab in 2002, and they then 6 months later thought actually she would make a good scientist. So they sent me to uni 1 day a week, and I worked full time. I was a single parent, my son was about 3 or so, and he went to nursery every day, and when I couldn't get him to nursery for financial reasons, he came to uni with me. So we'd stop on the way, get a Bob the Builder book or something like that, some crayons, and I'd say, right, Dean, we've got an hour, don't move, don't talk. If you need to go to the loo, do it now, because you can't get up and go. You're not supposed to be here. I needed him to be invisible. And he was great. He was so good. He never moved a muscle. Even when I had to do assessments and he had to sit outside the lecture theatre, he never moved. And he made it so easy for me to get through my studies. And I did. When he was 8, I graduated with a degree in biomedical sciences. And a few months after that, because I did my training in my lab, I qualified as a specialist biomedical scientist. So it worked, it came true. It was really hard work, really hard work. I struggled because of my learning, and I really struggled with the money and getting to uni, getting dean, to and from school. And I just thought so many times, you know what, I don't know why I'm doing this. This is such hard work. I'm having a really hard time of it. But I had to get to the end of it. I was so close to, it was 4 years, the degree, and it just, yeah, it was really hard work. And there were many times when I wanted to throw in the towel and just forget about it. But I couldn't, because I wouldn't be a scientist anymore, and that was my goal, be a scientist.
And provide a better life for your child.
Yeah. Like I say, you know, at the beginning we were claiming benefits, and it wasn't good enough. I didn't want that sort of life for him, and I didn't want it for me. So, and I just, my personality won't let me just swim along like that. I'm just not that sort of person. No, the one thing I would say to myself at 16 is knuckle down, revise, do some work, recognise when you've got a problem, don't just leave it, because that's what I did. I thought I was doing okay at school, doing homework, I was having such a good time that I thought actually I would get through my exams fine. but I didn't. So my 16-year-old self would work a lot harder at school.